All right. OK. Welcome, everyone, to today's Google Search Central SEO Office Hours Hangout. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do are these office hour hangouts where people can join in and ask their questions around search. We have a handful of questions submitted already on YouTube. We can go through some of those. But we can also do some live ones to get started. And it looks like Christian is the first one with his hands raised. Go for it.
Good morning, John. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, great to have this opportunity to ask a question here. John, I already sent it to you, and I thought I ask it again here in the Webmaster Hangout because I think it can maybe interesting for other guys as well. So it's about an e-commerce website. We have a category page with products and a huge advisory text, and the ranking for one of the most important keywords dropped after stable rankings for about a year. The interesting thing is that the ranking dropped only for the keyword in a plural form, but not in singular form. And the overall visibility of the website has even slightly increased. So it's just this keyword. And yeah, you already mentioned this could result from Google not being able to differentiate between transactional and informational content. But what would interest me is, why is this only with the keyword in singular and not in plural? And do you have any advisory for this?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. But I looked at your page when you sent it to me. And one of the things I really noticed is that it is like on the one hand, like a category page, but also there's just so much textual information on there as well, which I think makes it really hard for us to figure out what we should show it for. Is it for someone who's like trying to buy one of these products or trying to get more information about these products? Is it for someone looking for one product, or kind of like a bigger picture of the whole space? That's something where I could imagine it's tricky for our systems to try to figure out. So that's why I kind of recommended there to try to split this off and to have 2 pages instead of just one that tries to cover everything. And with singular and plural, I don't know for sure if our systems would take that into account, but I could imagine that being something where if you're searching for like a kind of product in plural, maybe you want different kinds of products. If you're searching for one product in singular, maybe you just want like a product landing page or something. And I could imagine that our systems over time try to figure out what the intent is of these queries, and also that this intent can change over time, where if we see that maybe we got it wrong with singular and plural there, it could happen that we switch it back to something where we say, oh, actually, this is more informational. Or maybe it's also seasonal, where we would say, well, at this time, it's an informational query. But maybe if in December you're searching for Christmas trees, then you want to buy one. You have more of a transactional intent. And if you have one page that covers both of these intents, on the one hand, that's kind of good because you're trying to cover both sides. But it can happen that we look at the page and say, oh, this is a transactional page. And then your kind of informational intent that you're also adding there is essentially being ignored. So by having 2 separate pages, you can kind of see that shift in intent over time.
So could it be a solution to have some kind of compressed information on the category page? So like a list of bullet points with the most important advisories, and to outsource the rest to another page which links to the category page?
Sure, I think that's good. I mean, some people have completely separate pages. Other sites have something like a blog set up where they put this informational content in the blog, and then they link to the category pages or individual products. However you want to combine that, I think is generally fine.
Okay, and this can be different for different keywords. So we have other category pages where we have the same setup. and there we don't have this problem at all. So can it be that this problem arises only for special kinds of keywords, or?
I don't think we would like manually create lists of keywords for these things. It's something that our systems try to pick up automatically. And it can happen that our systems pick it up in one way on one set of pages and in a different way on another set of pages. And it can also happen that it shifts over time. So that's something where I would try to separate this out so that you have clear intents per page. And that's something where I might try it with one kind of page first and figure out what the optimal model is for you, for your users, so that they can still kind of go from one part to the other. And then think about what you want to do with the rest.
OK. Thanks, John.
Sure. All right, Kamal. Oh, I think you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Similar question to the Christians. I read a case study about the fluffy descriptions on the category pages of e-commerce websites. As you suggested, we shouldn't manipulate the system about the intent of the page. But one of the competitors in the market used the same strategy with the keyword stuff, and the indexed pages are the same, include the same products, but different texts. But all of them are on the search results. And in this case, how should we compete with them? How can we compete with them? For example, we wrote 500 words for that pages. But as I read these case studies, I decided that we should use them on blog posts and create a link to the category pages. But does it guarantee the result in that case?
Nothing is guaranteed. So I think that's kind of like the basis. It is something where, like I mentioned with Christian, it's sometimes tricky for our systems to figure out what the intent is of the page. And in some cases, it's a lot easier. In some cases, it's a little bit harder. So having some amount of information on a category page is good. But having it so that you have clear separate pages for the different intents, I think makes it a lot easier for our systems and makes it a lot easier for users as well. If they want information, then they land on an informational page, and they don't have to think, oh, is this a store, or is this, I don't know, something else? And if after going through the informational content, they feel they would like to buy something, then they should have an easy way to get there. So something like a clear and visible call to action at the end, or in between, or wherever you want to place that.
But what if the Google recognizes page informational, but people still engage with products?
How do you mean?
For example, I see that the page is informational, but I still engage with products and buy something, and Google have the data that people engage with these pages. In that case, I think that the page is worthy to rank on the top, right?
I don't know if that would always be the case. I could imagine there are situations where it makes sense to have that kind of a mixed intent on a page. But I wouldn't say that's like the ideal situation.
What is the limit for the words that we have to use on that pages?
We don't have any limits.
OK.
No,
300 is OK, I think.
There's no limit. So I'm just not going to say like yes or no. I think it's something where, especially with category pages, you need to have some information on the page so that we understand what the topic is. But that's generally very little information. And in many cases, we understand that from the products that you have listed anyway. If the names of the products are clear enough to us to understand, oh, this is, I don't know, running shoes or something, like Nike running shoes, Adidas running shoes, different brands, whatever, then it's clear that this is a list of running shoes. You don't need to put an extra text there. But sometimes product names are a little bit hard to understand. And then it might make sense to add some additional text to give us some context there. But it's usually additional context in the size of, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 sentences.
Can we use the same text on blog post and the category pages?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about like a very small amount of text, then having that duplicated is absolutely no problem. Usually on the blog post, you would have a lot more. And if there's a handful of sentences that are the same, like that's totally fine.
So I can use 1 or 2 paragraphs from blog post on the category pages. It's
Sure.
not a problem, yeah? Okay,
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Cool. OK, Gaston.
Yeah, hi. So I have 2 questions, but I'm only going to ask one and the opportunity to other. So I'm working on a large website with a couple of million pages. We did a redirection between 2 languages, merging 2 Spanish languages, one into the other, redirecting everything from one Spanish to the other. So the migration is going well. The traffic it's moving from the second path. Just to clarify, it's a redirection between 2 subfolders, or everything within the same domain. The thing that I want to raise here is we are not seeing any change in the coverage metrics after almost 3 weeks of having done that redirection. We are not seeing any change in the coverage metric. No drop in the valid pages, no increase, not an increase in excluded pages because of redirections or anything like that. Should we be concerned about that?
So you're moving content from one subfolder to a different subfolder on the same site?
We are merging two subfolders.
OK.
So we went from a site that had, let's say, 10 million pages to a site that has now 8 million pages.
OK.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a fixed timeline for those kind of things to be visible. One of the things that plays in there is that we crawl pages in a different speed across a website. And some pages we will recrawl every day, and other pages we will recrawl maybe once a month or every few months. So if the content in these folders that you're merging is content that is very rarely crawled, then it's going to take a long time for that to be reflected. Whereas if it's content that is very actively being crawled, then you should see changes there within usually, I don't know, a week or so. So those are kind of the aspects that I might take into account there.
Oh yeah, I'm aware of that. But my thing is, so the traffic is going to one part of the site to the other. Everything's going well, but we are also seeing that in the log files that Googlebot is crawling the direction well. But we are not seeing it in the coverage metrics. We are concerned that might be either a reporting bug, or that we should be waiting, or I don't know, the coverage metrics are updated once a month, possibly.
No, I think the index coverage report is updated maybe twice a week. I'm not 100% sure, but a lot of the reports in Search Console are like once or twice a week. So that might be something where it's just a delay. But if you're seeing the traffic going to the right pages, if you're looking at the performance report and you're seeing that kind of a shift, then I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think you need to watch out for the index coverage report for something like this. Because usually what happens when you merge pages like this is our systems first have to figure out that we have to find a new canonical for these pages. So you take 2 pages and you fold them into one. Then we see this is a set of pages. We have to pick a canonical. And that process takes a little bit of time. And then it takes a bit of time for that to be reflected in the reporting. Whereas if you do something like a clean site move, then we can just transfer everything. We don't have this canonicalization kind of process that we have to figure out. So I could imagine that it just takes longer to be visible there.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. All right, Daniel.
Hey, John.
Hi.
Just a couple of questions. You said quite a few times you can't just work on a page or a set of pages. That won't necessarily be enough to get them ranking, getting them ranking well if the rest of the website isn't doing well. So my question is around, I suppose, specifically the algorithms. With new pages, much younger pages on the website, when Google comes along and crawls it and looks to understand it, does it then compare those pages to older legacy pages on the site and say, okay, well, yeah, these pages are great, but these much older pages are actually rubbish. So that will then affect the quality of the newer pages and the category pages? Is that something that the algorithms do to, I guess, to really understand the quality of the website?
I guess in some sense that could be happening. I mean, what usually happens is when we try to understand the quality of a website overall, it's just a process that takes a lot of time. And it has, I don't know, a fairly long lead time there. So if you add, I don't know, 5 pages to a website that has 10,000 pages already, then we're going to probably focus on most of the site first. And then over time, we'll see how that kind of settles down with the new content there as well. So I guess it kind of goes in the direction that you're asking.
Okay, cool. So so it definitely, yeah. Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
My other question is around, I guess, backlinks. So I guess Google isn't, if you get a backlink, it's not just going to assume that it's a good quality backlink and then therefore just pass link equity to the site, blindly. So does Google, when it's crawling, these backlinks, does it either look at the referral traffic and play that into the algorithm, or does it, if it doesn't see that information, does it try to, I guess, assess whether there's a high propensity to click on that link? And so if there is a high propensity to click on that link, then they will pass link equity. Whereas if there isn't, then say, you could just click it, you could literally create a blog and link now. In that situation, in that case, Google will say, well, actually, there's no traffic. There's not really a lot going on here. So why should we pass any form of link equity? So in terms of, in terms of that, does that kind of feed into whether or not link equity does get passed on to a site?
I don't think so. So we don't use things like traffic through a link when trying to evaluate how a link should be valued. As far as I know, we don't look at things like the probability that someone will click on a link with regards to how we should value it, because sometimes links are essentially just references, and it's not so much that we expect people to click on every link on a page. But if someone is referring to your site and saying, like, I'm doing this because this expert here said to do that, then people are not going to click on that link and always look at your site and kind of confirm whatever is written there, but they'll see it as almost like a reference. It's like if they needed to find out more information, they could go there. But they don't need to. And from that point of view, I don't think we would be taking that into account when it comes to kind of evaluating the value of a link.
So is it more on page factors then when when the algorithms are reviewing that link and whether or not you should pass on? Are they assessing that website as a whole and then saying yes or no, we should pass it on, or actually we don't trust this site, so we won't?
A little bit. I mean, some of that you will see if you look into how PageRank works. It's a bit different, I think, nowadays how we handle that. But Essentially, the idea behind that is that we kind of, or in general with PageRank, you set up some value for the individual pages, and then you pass a fraction of that value on through the links there.
Yeah.
So essentially, if a page is seen as being very high value, then the links from there will be treated with a little bit more weight compared to some random page on the internet. And we, as far as I know, we don't do it exactly the same way as things were in the beginning with regards to PageRank. But it's a good way of kind of thinking about that.
OK, cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, John.
Sure. Cool. OK, let me go through some of the submitted questions, and then I'll get back to folks that have their hands raised here as well. Don't worry, we'll find time. Let's see. The first one I have is a domain site migration. We did a site migration from one domain to a new one, followed all migration requirements and recommendations. We updated redirects, canonical tags, and tested beforehand. We added the new property, all of these things, but we can't get the change of address to work. It has a validation error saying that there's a 301 redirect where it can't fetch the old domain. How do we pass the validation for a change of address tool? So I think, first of all, the most important thing to keep in mind is that the change of address tool is just one extra signal that we use with regards to migrations. It's not a requirement. So if, for whatever reason, you can't get the change of address tool to work for your website, if you have the redirect set up properly, all of those things, then you should be set. It's not something that you absolutely need to do. I imagine most sites, when they do kind of moves, they don't actually use this tool. It's something more those who know about Search Console and those who know about all of these kind of fancy things, they might be using it. With regards to why it might be failing, it's really hard to say without knowing your site's name or the URLs that you're kind of testing there. One thing that I have seen is if you do something like if you have a www version and a non-www version of your website, and you redirect step by step through that. So for example, you redirect to the non-www version, and then you redirect to the new domain. Then that can happen, that throws us off if you submit the change of address in the version of the site that is not kind of the primary version. So that might be one thing to double check with regards to the change of address tool. Are you submitting the version that is, or that was currently indexed, or are you submitting maybe the alternate version in Search Console? But otherwise, I'm not aware of any general issues with that tool. So if you want to send me your domain name or your site name, I'm happy to double check. Probably also just posting in the help forum will also get you some feedback on what you might be doing kind of differently than what the tool would expect. Can I add multiple schema types to one page? If yes, what would be the best way to combine both FAQ schema and recipe schema on one page? You can put as much structured data on your page as you want. But for most cases, when it comes to the rich results that we show in search results, we tend to pick just one kind of structured data or one rich result type and just focus on that. So if you have multiple types of structured data on your page, then there's a very high chance that we just pick one of these types and we show that. So if you want any particular type to be shown in the search results, and you see that there are no kind of combined uses when you look at the search results otherwise, then I would try to focus on the type that you want and not just combine it with other things. So ideally, pick one that you really want and focus on that. Our Search Console crawl stats report is showing a steady increase of 404 pages that are not a part of our site. They don't exist in our sitemap, nor are they generated by internal search. they appear to be Google searches that are being appended to our URLs, and Google is trying to crawl them. Under the crawl response breakdown, these 404s make up over 40% of the crawl response. How do we make sure this doesn't negatively affect our crawlability and indexability? So I think, first of all, we don't make up URLs. So it's not that we would take Google searches and then make up URLs on your website. My guess is that these are just random links that we found on the web, maybe from some scraper site that is scraping things in a bad way or something like that. So that's something that happens all the time. And we find these links, and then we crawl them. We see that they return 404, and then we start ignoring them. So in practice, this is not something that you have to take care of. If they're 404, if they don't exist, then that's fine. That's the way that it should be. And usually what happens with these kind of links is we try to figure out overall for your website which URLs we need to be crawling and which URLs we need to be crawling at which frequency. And then we take into account, after we've worked out what we absolutely need to do, what we can do kind of additionally. And in that additional bucket, which is also like a very, I think, like a graded set of URLs, essentially, that would also include things like random links from scraper sites, for example. So if you're seeing that we're crawling a lot of URLs on your site that come from these random links, essentially, you can assume that we've already finished with the crawling of the things that we care about, that we think your site is important for. And we just have time and capacity on your server, and we're just going to try other things as well. So from that point of view, it's not that these 404s would be causing issues with the crawling of your website. It's almost more a sign that, well, we have enough capacity for your website. And if you happen to have more content that you actually linked within your website, we would probably crawl and index that too. So essentially, it's almost like a good sign. And you definitely don't need to block these by robots text. It's not something that you need to suppress. It's something, it's just super common on the web that sites link in a random way, or maybe they have broken HTML. And then we end up discovering a bunch of URLs like this. We have a service website operating in France only, and we have a lot of traffic coming from other countries which have really bad bandwidth, which causes our Core Web Vitals scores to go down. Since we're not operating outside of France, we don't have any use for traffic outside of it. Is it recommended to block traffic from other countries? I would try to avoid blocking traffic from other countries. I think it's something where ultimately, it's up to you. It's your website. You can choose what you want to do, but I would try to avoid doing that. And in particular, in this case, one of the things to keep in mind is that we crawl almost all websites from the US. So if you're located in France and you block all other countries, you would be blocking Googlebot crawling as well. And then essentially, we would not be able to index any of your content. So from that point of view, if you want to block other countries, make sure that at a minimum, you're not blocking the country where Googlebot is crawling from, at least if you care about search.
John, can I add something in this?
Sure.
I have a similar question. Actually, we have live TV page for our news channel, which we are not providing in US. But as you told, the site crawl in the US only. So we provide information. This live TV is not available in US. So US crawler crawled, and the Google results show. If I type in Google, then this hey, this live TV is not available in your location. Even I search from India as well. That's why, because so in that case, can we do clocking techniques for our live page? So we show the India version of live TV in, for Google crawler, but the user we show the live TV not available wala live TV not available text page. so that its issue fix automatically, so to avoid this issue?
Based on our guidelines, you can't. Or you shouldn't. So our guidelines are pretty clear that you should be showing Googlebot the same content as other users from that location.
Yes.
So if everyone else in the US is blocked, you shouldn't be showing Googlebot the content. So that's kind of, I think, the baseline situation. There is, I think, now that you mention it, especially with regards to news sites, one way that might work, I don't know, is the use of the paywall structured data. In that case, it's something where you could show Googlebot the normal content. And then if you have a paywall that's required to access the content, you would just need to mark up that content with the paywall structured data. And then users, if they have access, they can log in on their side and actually get that content.
We can't provide even after the paywall.
Yeah, if you can't provide it even after the paywall, then you wouldn't be able to provide it to Google. Yeah, I think it's kind of an awkward situation, and it's I think a little bit unfair towards people who are not in the US or not in the location where sites are being crawled, because the other way around is of course possible. Like if you have a website that is based in the US and you block India, then that wouldn't be affecting the search results because we crawl from the US.
Yes.
So I think it's a little bit unfair, but from a technical point of view, it's just how we have to deal with crawling. We can't crawl from all countries, and the policies, at least at the moment, are such that you should treat Googlebot the same as other users from that country. It might be that at some point we change those policies, but they've been like that for a very long time.
So even we can't redirect to different pages in US if based on user agent or based on country from the server end.
Yeah, I mean, like what you do essentially for users in the US is essentially what we would use for indexing. So another approach that I've seen for other kinds of content is to provide some level of information that is something that you can provide in the US. For example, I think I've seen this with maybe casino websites. I'm not sure, where sometimes the content is illegal in the US, where they have kind of a simplified version of the content, which they can provide to the US, which is more like descriptive information about the content. So if you have movies that you can't provide in the US, you can still serve the description of the movie in the US. You just can't serve the movie itself. And that way, at least you have a basis of content that it would be indexable, and that could be findable then in search.
Okay. So earlier, I think I was maybe Gary or someone else from Google. In some condition, you can use clocking. So you can, in some condition, I don't know which condition is that, but I think my condition is same. We can use that.
I mean, our policies are pretty clear in that regard. Like it should really be what users see in that country. And I mean, there's an aspect of you might be willing to take a risk and say, well, I assume the web spam team will not take action on my website because I'm a legitimate business, and if they check, they will see what I'm doing. But that's something where you're essentially breaking the guidelines and hoping that it comes out well. And for normal businesses, I don't think that's really a good idea. And the other tricky part there is a lot of the teams at Google that work on search, they are also based in the US. So if someone in the US were to double check, like what is happening on this website, they also see it's blocked. So it's it's kind of tricky. I think I think this question also goes into the Core Web Vitals aspect there, where maybe you want to block countries where connectivity is slow. And from that point of view, I think, I mean, in this case, blocking other countries would be a problem with regards to search, first of all. And with regards to Core Web Vitals, it's more something, well, if you want to block other countries, you can do that. I still don't think it's a good idea. So I would try to avoid that if at all possible.
OK, sounds good.
Cool. OK, let me see. Next question I have here. Google recently regrouped together 30,000 pages on our site that are noticeably different pages for Core Web Vitals scores. This has brought the average LCP for these pages up to 3.4 seconds, despite the fact that our product pages were averaging 2.5 seconds before the regrouping. We're working to get these pages at 2.5 seconds below the threshold, but our tactics now seem too insignificant to get us to the score we need to hit. Is the grouping set and then a score average is taken, or is a score taken and then the grouping is set? This will help us establish if these product pages under 2.5 seconds will help to solve the problem or not. So my understanding is with grouping in general, we don't have any clear or exact definition of how we do grouping, because that's something that has to evolve over time a little bit, depending on the amount of data that we have for a website. So if we have a lot of data for a lot of different kinds of pages on a website, it's a lot easier for our systems to say we will do grouping slightly more fine-grained versus as rough as before. Whereas if we don't have a lot of data, we end up maybe even going to a situation where we take the whole website as one group. So that's kind of the one thing. The other thing is the data that we collect is based on field data. You see that in Search Console as well, which means it's not so much that we would take the average of individual pages and just average them by number of pages, but rather what would happen in practice is that it's more of a traffic-weighted average, in the sense that some pages will have a lot more traffic and we'll have more data there, and other pages will have less traffic and we won't have as much data there. So that might be something where you're seeing these kind of differences. If a lot of people are going to your home page and not so many to individual products, then it might be that that home page is weighted a little bit higher just because we have more data there. So that's kind of the direction I would go there. And in practice, that means instead of focusing so much on individual pages, I would tend to look at things like your Google Analytics or other analytics that you have to figure out which pages or which page types are getting a lot of traffic. And then by optimizing those pages, you're essentially trying to improve the user experience for the users on your website. And that's something that we would try to pick up for the Core Web Vitals scoring there. So essentially, less of averaging across the number of pages and more averaging across the traffic of what people actually see when they come to your website. And I think that also goes into the second question, like what logic does Google use to group these pages? Essentially, it's first of all, we have to have data. And if we don't have data, field data that we can use there, then we can't kind of group pages in a more fine-grained way. We're having multiple issues on our site where Search Console says we're ranking for keywords, but when we check the rankings, we don't rank at all. What might be the cause of this, and which is right? So Search Console does not invent rankings. It's not a theoretical ranking report that we show in Search Console. It is based on what people actually saw. So from that point of view, the data that you see in Search Console, when it's there, it is based on what was actually visible in the search results. However, sometimes the search results can be really hard to figure out in terms of where your page is being shown and sometimes these things change over time. So usually what I try to do when I look at things like our blog and wonder, like, why does this page get so much traffic for this weird keyword, is I'll try to figure out what the most specific setting is where this pattern is visible in the report. That means picking out the individual country where it's most visible, maybe the type of page where it's most visible, and the type of search result where it's most visible. And then also looking at the graph to see, is this something that was maybe a one-time spike, or is this something that is consistently at that level? And if it was a one-time spike, then it might be that I can't just reproduce it anymore. If it's consistently at that level, then it feels like there's a chance that if I search with those settings, I could see that as well. It's not always guaranteed, but there's at least a small chance there. And in particular, you also, when you're looking at the normal web search results in the performance report, we also include things like the images one box or the knowledge panel on the side, and the maps one box, for example, if that's visible somewhere. All of these things can count as impressions as well. So you really need to take a look at the whole page. And especially with the images one box, it's sometimes a little bit surprising when you finally find kind of a link to your site in there. But from our point of view, that's also an impression on the search results page. The other thing that can happen is that sometimes the search results are very personalized. And it can happen that for a query that has usually a fairly high search volume, that maybe a really small portion of those people see something that would show your website. And that's usually a little bit harder to try to figure out. But you can kind of guess at that if you look at the queries and you think, oh, this is a very popular query, probably. But my website is getting very few impressions for this query. Then it's possible that the majority of the people who are searching for this actually don't see your website. And only a very small portion of people would see your website. And then that could be the case where maybe there's something happening with personalization or something else that's playing a role here, where suddenly these links are also shown. So those are kind of the different ways I would try to narrow that down. Let's see. With the advent of the MUM algorithm, which is kind of a machine learning algorithm that we use in search now, will search results be a response to multiple sources? I mean, that is when the user searches for a topic and the answers are selected from multiple sources and provided to the user as a package. We think that competition in the future will be kind of an interaction between competitors. Together, they can meet the needs of a searcher. Sites focus on services that they can provide better. Several competitors can meet the needs of the searchers. The user then needs a portfolio that is completed by several sites that kind of compete for that area. I don't know. Maybe that will happen at some point. We do have a notion of trying to provide a diverse set of options in the search results, where if we can tell that there are maybe things like very strong or different opinions on a specific topic, and it's a question of like what opinions are there out there, then it can make sense to provide something like a diverse set of results that cover different angles for that topic. I don't think that applies to most queries, but sometimes that's something that we do try to take into account. With all of these machine learning algorithms, I think it's always a little bit tricky because we tend to, I don't know, show them more for the user side in our presentations, and then turning that around and saying, well, how can I optimize for this machine learning algorithm? That's always a little bit trickier. End of September, we have another Search On event lined up. And they also mentioned something in the announcement around machine learning, artificial intelligence. I could imagine that there might be something similar to MUM being mentioned there as well. I don't have any insight, but it always feels like that's a time where we kind of show off the new research and new technologies that are being done. But it's very often very easy to take those announcements that are made for the user side and try to turn them around and say, oh, as an SEO, that means I have to do things like this. And often that kind of inverse relationship is not so straightforward. How does Google treat subdomains versus folders? Is authority passed through the subdomains? Oh my gosh. I don't know if someone is trying to troll us again. From our point of view, when we talk with the search quality team, they say subdomains and subdirectories are essentially equivalent. You can put your content however you want. Some people in the SEO world have very strong opinions. And if we say it doesn't matter and someone else says you should do it like this, and you want to follow their advice, then it's like, go ahead and do that. Because like from our point of view, like we say it doesn't matter. I think that there are a few aspects that play a role there, which are less around SEO, but more around things like reporting. How easy is it to set these sites up? Do you want to track their performance separately on separate host names or together in one host name? Those kind of things. With some kinds of websites, it's also something where we might treat things on a subdomain slightly differently because we think maybe this is more like a separate website versus all of the same website. So those things can all play a role there. In practice, what I would say is try to focus on your infrastructure first and see what makes sense for you, and then work on that. And if you're working together with an SEO who has a very strong opinion and everyone else is like, whatever you want, then like, I don't mind like if you follow their opinion either, because that should work too. Let's see. When doing a site migration, on the day we pull the trigger, there's a robots text block on both domains. We do a 302 temporary redirect and switch to a 301 later on, or we serve a 503 HTTP status code site-wide for a day or a few hours while the developers try to fix whatever's broken. So from our point of view, these are all separate situations. And it's not the case that we would say, well, this is a site move with this variation. But rather, if you're blocking things, if things are broken, then we would, first of all, see that as something that is broken. And if at a later stage we see they're actually redirects, then we would say, well, now the site is redirecting. And we would treat those as separate states. So if on the day you want to do the site move, something breaks and everything is broken on your server, then we would just see, well, everything is broken on the server. We wouldn't know that your intent was to do a site move because we would just see that everything is broken. So from that point of view, I would treat these as separate states. And of course, try to fix any broken state as quickly as you can, and essentially move to the migration then as quickly as you can after that. Oh, wow. Still so many more questions. OK, maybe I'll switch to a few more live questions here. And I saw some in the chat as well. Maybe I'll just grab those quickly. And I have a bit more time afterwards as well, and we can go through more things live as well. Gambling website promotion policy for publishers. I don't know what the policies are from the publisher side, if you're talking about the ad side of things. From the search side of things, SEO-wise, like publish whatever you want. Would you mind taking a look at my website at the end? OK, that sounds like something for the end. OK, and let's see. How do I find the raised hands again? Oh, my gosh. Where is it? Tis. I think you're next.
Hi, John. I have just two questions really quick. One submitted on YouTube. is it worth like looking at old news and removing, no indexing, disallowing it? It's a site with like content from 10+ years old. Does it something like do some to the quality of the page overall, or crawl budget? It's a page with like 3 million pages on it. So does it do something to that?
I don't think you would get a lot of value out of removing just old news. So it's also not something I would recommend to news websites, because sometimes old information is still useful. So from that point of view, I wouldn't do this for SEO reasons. If there are reasons why you want to remove content or put it into kind of like an archive section on your website for usability reasons or for maintenance or whatever, that's something that you can definitely do. But I wouldn't just blindly remove old content because it's old.
OK, clear. Thanks. And another question is, I was just really curious, it's about Googlebot. I was working on my personal site a few months ago. And the very first thing as an SEO I did is verified Google Search Console and Google Analytics and all that stuff. So I was developing for a few months. And when I was ready to go live and do a crawl request for the homepage in Search Console, I already saw that Googlebot tried to crawl pages in the crawl stats. And I was wondering, how does that happen and why does it happen? Because it's a new domain, there are no links to it. And I was just wondering, how does Googlebot still find this domain and tries to crawl it?
I think it's something that we do when you verify a website in Search Console, where we kind of say, well, it looks like you're trying to get this website into search. We don't have any information on it. We will take a look. And I don't think it's something that we do for policy reasons or anything. It's basically just, oh, it looks like you're trying to go into search. We will help you so that you don't have to do every step yourself.
That's something I thought. OK, thanks. There were more questions.
All right, thanks. Gaston.
So do you, I don't know how to word this question. So the thing is, we have a sitemap with the, let's say, 200 most important pages for our site. And we have this sitemap is static, and it's been the same sitemap for 3 years, let's say. But we have one page that has been, the last time that was crawled was 2 years ago. And Google doesn't deem to recrawl that page. We added links, internal links. We added that page to another sitemap. We added external links. We did a bunch of things, but we don't get, and also, of course, requesting the indexation from Search Console. We don't know what's going on. And if you can give us some insights on how we should approach that. Because we are certain that the sitemap is being crawled, because Search Console says that, and we are also seeing that in our log files.
Yeah. So you added it to the sitemap and to internal links, and it's not being crawled at all, or is it just not being indexed?
It is indexed, but it's not being recrawled. So it has, and on Google SERP, it has the old information. It hasn't updated. It hasn't updated the titles, the meta description, and all that. So yeah, we are missing things.
OK. Did you try to submit it separately?
Yes, multiple times, across multiple months. This is an issue that we are facing for 2 years now.
And it's just one page. It's like the rest of the website is being updated normally?
Well, not the entire rest of the website, because it's a very large website, but we are focused on this particular one because it's about one very successful product of us.
OK. I don't know. It sounds kind of weird. I mean, if you can drop the link into the chat here, I can take a look afterwards to see if there's something very obvious. Sometimes it's just the case that we don't crawl all pages all the time. But if you're talking about something that has been kind of like not being crawled for several months now, and you tried all the submission methods, and the rest of the site is kind of OK with crawling, then that feels weird. But I don't know. I could take a look.
Yeah, I'll drop the URL in the chat. Thanks, John.
OK, cool. Stefano.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Hello. So my question is about the duplicate content across manufacturer and, let's say, reseller aggregators e-commerce site. So suppose that there is a website selling thousands of products from a variety of different brands, and the commercial teams has been working hard to get all the official information from the brand. And then the data entry people are constantly uploading all of this information about catalogs and brands, etc. And most of the time, the content, I mean, the images, the text, and the descriptions are the same as the manufacturer. Of course, it's the official text and the official information, but that's obviously result in duplicate content issues. So my question is just a small part of this. Would it be a good idea to put an external link to the product sheet, to the official product sheet, from the e-commerce to the manufacturer? Ideally, the best will be to have both linking each other. But assuming Googlebot already is aware of the duplication, will it be an improvement for the e-commerce to say, OK, this is where I took the content from, those pages are strictly related, or will it result in a downgrade of the e-commerce site?
I don't think it would change anything. So we don't need to have a link to the original source. So there are two aspects here when it comes to duplicate content. First of all, you don't get a penalty for duplicate content. So that's kind of, I think, like just even before you look into it too much, the only time we would have something like a penalty or an algorithmic action or manual action is when the whole website is purely duplicated content. So if it's one website that is scraping other websites, for example. If these are e-commerce sites and you have the description that's the same and the rest of your website is different, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to worry about any kind of demotion or dropping in ranking or anything. With duplicate content, we have essentially two roughly different things that we look at. On the one hand, if we check if the whole page is the same. And that includes everything like the header and the footer and the address of the store and things like that, which in your cases would not be the case. Because one is maybe a manufacturer's website and the description is the same, but everything around it is different. And so that's kind of the basic kind of duplicate content. The other kind is with regards to things like a description. That plays a role when we show a snippet in the search results. So essentially, what we try to avoid is to create search results pages where the snippet is exactly the same as other websites. So if someone is searching for something generic, which is only in the description of that product, and the snippet that we would show for your website and for the manufacturer were exactly the same, then we would try to pick one of those pages and show only that one. So that's kind of the other part of the duplicate content story is a little bit simplified. But that also means that if someone is searching for kind of something generic that is in the description, and we can tell that they want to buy it, and maybe you're the best source or the local source of that product, or you have it in stock or whatever, then we would show your pages and not the other one. And all of that is independent of you marking up like where you took this description from. It's essentially we have this description. We want to show it in search. and we'll pick the best page that we can show for this description. So from that point of view, I think it's always a good practice to have unique descriptions on your pages. But if you have a lot of products, it's not always possible. And it's also the case that we would not penalize a website for having duplicate descriptions in their products. Cool. OK. Let me take a break here with the recording. And I'll be around a little bit longer as well, so we can go through more questions too. Thank you all for watching. If you watch this on YouTube, if you want to join these in the future, I always have the links in the community part of our channel. Feel free to join in there or add more questions there if you'd like. And otherwise, I wish you all a great weekend, and maybe see you next time.
Thank you, John.